Two
The
broken
dust
things
hadn't
deserve
settled
each
yet
other.
when they
She's
brought
not
her
broken,
out.
she's human.
Silver
No one
Creek
wants
Trading
damaged goods.
Post,
I do.
1883.
Let's go home,
The
Alara.
kind of place where deals were made in whiskey and blood, where the desert met civilization, and neither one won. The Apache delegation stood on one side, their horses stamping in the heat. The townspeople clustered on the other hands, never far from their guns. Between them, a space that held more than just dirt. It held decades of mistrust, violence, and the kind of wounds that never quite healed. Chief Karuk stood at the center of it all, his weathered face carved with lines that told stories no white man would ever understand. He was built like a bear, shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of his people's survival. But today, there was something else in his eyes, something cruel, something that made even his own warriors shift uncomfortably. "Bring her," he commanded in Apache, then repeated in broken English for the crowd's benefit. "Bring the cursed one." Two young braves disappeared behind the trading post. The crowd leaned in whispers, rising like heat off the packed earth. What new game was this? What fresh humiliation would the chief serve up to prove his power? Then they saw her. Alara emerged from the shadows, and the crowd's whispers died. She walked with a pronounced limp, her left leg dragging slightly, forcing her to lean on a rough-hewn stick. Her right eye was clouded white like winter ice over dark water. The left eye, still good, stared straight ahead with a defiance that seemed at odds with her position. She wore a torn doe-skin dress patched in places with trader's cloth, marking her as neither fully Apache nor anything else. 23 winters she'd seen, though she looked older. Life had carved its story into her face the way wind carves stone, slowly, relentlessly, without mercy. Chief Karuk grabbed her arm rougher than necessary and pulled her forward. She stumbled but didn't fall, didn't cry out, just steadied herself and stood waiting for whatever fresh hell this day would bring. "This one," the chief announced, his voice carrying across the square, "is broken, useless. The spirits marked her as cursed when she was young, fell from a horse that should not have thrown her. The fever that followed took her eye, twisted her leg. No man wants her, no tribe needs her." He paused, letting his words sink in, then smiled a smile with no warmth in it. "But perhaps one of you will take her, for the price of a lame horse, or maybe a broken rifle that misfires. Broken things for broken things, yes." The Apache warriors laughed harsh and uncomfortable. Some of the townspeople chuckled too, that nervous laughter that comes when you're not sure if you're watching a joke or a tragedy. But most just stared, caught between pity and disgust. Alara's good eye swept the crowd. She saw it all, the sneers, the pity, the relief that it wasn't them standing there. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away, didn't bow her head. There was something in her bearing that suggested she'd been through this before, this public humiliation, and had learned that the only way through was to endure it with whatever dignity she could salvage. "Come now," Chief Karuk continued, enjoying his moment. "Surely someone needs a servant she can cook after a fashion, can mend clothes though her fingers shake. She knows the white man's words the missionaries taught her before they realized she was cursed. Maybe that's worth something to you Christians, a soul to save." He pushed her forward again, making her stumble toward the crowd. Her bad leg buckled, and she went down on one knee in the dust. The stick clattered away. For a moment she stayed there, dust settling on her dark hair, her good eye closed. "Get up," someone muttered from the crowd. Not kindly, more like you'd tell a dog to move. She reached for her stick fingers, stretching, but the chief kicked it away. "No," he said. "Let them see what they're buying. Stand up, cursed one. Show them how broken things move." The cruelty of it silenced even the nervous laughter. The square became a held breath, everyone waiting to see if she could rise, if she would rise, or if this was where she finally broke completely. Alara placed her palms flat on the ground. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up. Her bad leg shook with the effort. Her good leg took most of the weight, but she stood, swaying, slightly covered in dust but standing. That's when he stepped forward. Samuel Hart had been standing at the back of the crowd, apart from the others, as always. He was tall in the way of men who've learned to carry weight, not just physical, but the kind that settles in your bones and never leaves. His hands were scarred from years at the forge, his face weathered by sun and sorrow. He wore simple clothes, nothing fancy canvas pants, a cotton shirt rolled to the elbows, boots that had seen better decades. He hadn't come for the spectacle. He'd come for iron and coal supplies for his forge. But something in the way she stood, the way she refused to break, despite everything conspiring to crush her, something in that called to something in him. How much? His voice cut through the silence like a blade through cloth. Every head turned. Chief Kuruk's smile widened, thinking he'd found his mark, his fool. For you, blacksmith, for the man who speaks to no one, who lives alone like a ghost, perhaps she is perfect for you. Two broken souls together. What will you offer? Your worst horse, your dullest blade. Samuel walked forward, his boots heavy on the packed earth. He stopped just outside the circle that had formed around Ilara, close enough that she could see him clearly with her good eye. He didn't look at the chief. He looked at her. I asked how much. He repeated, his voice steady as iron. $1, the chief said, laughing. $1 silver for this worthless. Samuel pulled a $20 gold piece from his pocket and threw it in the dust at the chief's feet. She's not worthless, he said quietly, but everyone heard it. And you're done here. The laughter died completely. The chief's face darkened, his hand moving toward the knife at his belt. The crowd tensed, hands drifting toward weapons. This was the moment where things could go very bad, very fast. But Samuel just stood there steady as a mountain, his eyes never leaving Ilara's face. Take your gold and go, he said to the chief. The deal's done. The chief's face went through several shades of red before settling on something close to purple. $20 was more than most men saw in a month. It was an insult wrapped in gold, paying a fortune for something declared worthless. The message was clear. Samuel Hart was calling him a liar in front of everyone. For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind picked up swirling dust devils between the two groups. Somewhere a dog barked, then went quiet, as if even the animals sensed the tension. Then Chief Kuruk bent down, picked up the gold piece, and spit in the dirt beside it. Take her then, blacksmith. Take the cursed one. When misfortune finds your door, when your forge goes cold and your heart colder, still remember you chose this. He turned and barked orders in Apache. The warriors mounted their horses, wheeling away from the trading post in a cloud of dust and anger. But not before one of them, a young brave with kind eyes, tossed Ilara's walking stick toward her. It landed just out of reach, but the gesture wasn't lost on anyone watching. The crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves. Some thought Samuel had lost his mind. Others wondered what he saw that they didn't. Most were just glad the tension had broken without bloodshed. Samuel walked over and picked up the stick. He held it out to Ilara, careful not to touch her, letting her decide whether to take it. She looked at him with that one good eye, searching his face for the trick, the cruelty that had to be hiding there. Men didn't pay $20 for broken Apache women. Men didn't stand up to chiefs for servants they'd never met. There had to be an angle. Why? She asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. The English was accented but clear. The missionaries had done their work well. Because I know what it's like to be left standing alone, Samuel answered simply. Can you walk? She took the stick, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. His hands were rough but steady, marked by years of honest work. I can walk, she said, though her legs screamed otherwise. My wagon's by the smithy. Take your time. He turned and started walking, not looking back to see if she followed. It wasn't arrogance, it was respect. He was giving her the choice even now. She could run such as she was able. She could stay at the trading post and beg for other work. She could do anything, but what had been done to her for years be dragged along without a say. Alara stood there for a moment, weight on her good leg stick planted firm in the dirt. Around her, the townspeople went about their business, but she could feel their eyes, watching, waiting, judging. She took a step, then another. Each one hurt, but she'd learned long ago that pain was just another companion on the road, like hunger, like loneliness. You could let it stop you, or you could keep walking despite it. The smithy sat at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to desert, and the sound of hammered metal wouldn't disturb decent folks. It was a solid building made of adobe and timber, with a chimney that reached toward the sky like a finger pointing at heaven, or accusing it, depending on your mood. Samuel's wagon waited outside, loaded with sacks of coal and bars of raw iron. The horse, a sturdy bay mare, stood patient in the traces. She nickered softly when Samuel approached, and he ran a hand along her neck. "This is Rosie," he said to Alara. "She's got more sense than most people I know." Alara had made it to the wagon breathing hard but standing. She studied the horse, then the man, then the smithy behind them. Everything was well maintained but plain. No flourishes, no waste. The setup of a man who worked to live, not to impress. "You're the blacksmith," she said. It wasn't a question. "Samuel Hart, been here 4 years now. They say you lost your family." He stiffened slightly but didn't turn away. "They say a lot of things." "Is it true?" "Yes." The simple honesty of it surprised her. Most men would have told her to mind her business, or worse. But he just stood there, accepting the truth of his loss, like he accepted the heat of his forge as something that had shaped him, marked him, but not destroyed him. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. He looked at her, then really looked at her. Past the clouded eye and the limp, past the torn dress and the dust. He saw someone who knew what loss meant, what it cost to keep breathing when everything in you wanted to stop. "So am I," he said. "Come on, it's a fair ride to my place." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hands careful but firm. She settled herself, trying not to wince as her bad leg protested. He climbed up beside her, took the reins, and clicked his tongue. Rosie started forward, steady and sure. They rode in silence through the town. People stopped to stare. Margaret Hutchins, the banker's wife, actually dropped her shopping basket. Old Pete, who ran the saloon, shook his head like he was watching a funeral procession. The preacher's wife clutched her Bible tighter as if proximity to an Apache woman might contaminate her righteousness. Samuel ignored them all. His eyes stayed on the road ahead, his hands steady on the reins. But Alara saw the muscle in his jaw tighten, saw the way his shoulders set themselves against the weight of their judgment. "They think you're crazy," she said. "Probably right. Taking in an Apache woman, a broken one at that." "You're not broken," he said quietly. "Hurt, maybe. Scarred, definitely. But not broken. Broken things don't stand up when they're knocked down. Broken things don't survive what you've survived." She didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever suggested she was anything but damaged goods, a burden to be borne or cast off. The road led out of town into the desert proper. The land here was hard but beautiful in its way. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels, their arms raised to the endless sky. Mesquite and Palo Verde dotted the landscape, tough plants for a tough place. Mountains rose in the distance, purple-blue in the afternoon haze. "How far?" Alara asked. 5 miles, give or take. I built out there for the quiet. And to be away from them." She nodded back toward town. "That too." As they rode, Samuel found himself stealing glances at his unexpected passenger. Up close, he could see past the obvious injuries to other things. Her hands, though trembling slightly, showed the calluses of work. Her back was straight, despite everything carrying herself with a dignity that transcription couldn't break. And her good eye, dark brown, almost black, held an intelligence that the missionaries had clearly recognized and cultivated. "You can read," he said. Another not question. "Yes. Right, too. Numbers as well." Sister Catherine said I had a gift for learning. A bitter smile touched her lips. Lot of good it did me. Knowledge is never wasted. It is if no one lets you use it. Maybe that changes now. She looked at him sharply. Why? What do you want from me? The question hung between them like a blade. He could feel her tension the way she prepared herself for the answer she'd been trained to expect. That he wanted her body. That he wanted a servant. That he wanted someone to hurt the way he'd been hurt. I want you to have a safe place to rest, he said finally. I want you to have food that's yours, not scraps thrown your way. I want you to have the chance to figure out what you want, instead of always being told what others want from you. That's all. That's everything, he corrected. When's the last time anyone asked what you wanted? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I was 7 years old, before the fever. My mother asked if I wanted to learn the old songs or help with the hunting preparation. I chose the songs. Her voice went soft. I never got to learn them. They were climbing now, the road winding up into the foothills. The air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of pine. Samuel's place appeared around a bend, a modest cabin of logs and adobe, with a separate building for the forge, a small corral, and what looked like the beginning of a garden plot. It wasn't much, but it was clearly built with care. The walls were straight and true, the roof properly pitched to handle the occasional desert rain. Smoke drifted from the forge's chimney, suggesting banked coals waiting to be awakened. Everything spoke of a man who did things right the first time, who built to last. It's not fancy, Samuel said, suddenly self-conscious. It's standing, Ilara replied. That's more than I had this morning. He pulled the wagon up to the cabin, set the brake, and climbed down. He came around to help her, but she was already moving, determined to manage on her own. She made it to the ground, though her bad leg buckled slightly. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, just long enough for her to find her balance. Thank you, she said, the words rusty from disuse. Come inside. You need water and food, and that leg needs tending. I can tend myself. I'm sure you can, but you don't have to. Not anymore. She looked up at him. This strange man who spoke in kindnesses she didn't trust, couldn't trust. Not yet. But she was tired, so tired of fighting every moment just to survive. Maybe just for tonight she could rest. All right, she said. He opened the cabin door and she stepped through into a new world, one that smelled of cedar and iron leather and loneliness, but also possibly hope. The cabin was one large room divided by function rather than walls, a bed frame in one corner handmade and sturdy, a table with 2 chairs that didn't match, one clearly newer than the other, shelves lined with preserves, flour sacks, and coffee tins, a cook stove that had seen better days but still worked, tools hung on pegs with the precise organization of a man who reached for them in the dark. Ilara stood just inside the doorway, taking it all in. The space felt lived in but lonely, like a song with half the notes missing. Samuel moved to the stove, stirring the banked coals to life. Sit, he said, nodding toward the newer chair. That leg needs rest. She remained standing. I need to know what you expect. He paused, coffee pot in hand. I expect you're tired. I expect you're hungry. I expect you need time to heal. Beyond that, I don't expect anything. Men always expect something. I'm not most men. That's what they all say. He set the pot on the stove and turned to face her fully. 3 years ago, my wife Sarah died of scarlet fever. My son Thomas went 2 days later. He was 6 years old. I buried them myself because the ground was too hard for anyone else to bother helping. Since then, I've lived alone, worked alone, and expected nothing from nobody. I'm not looking for a replacement wife. I'm not looking for anything. I just couldn't stand there and watch them treat you like you were nothing, because I know what it feels like to be reduced to nothing, and no one deserves that. The words came out flat, factual, like he was reading an inventory list. But Ilara heard the pain underneath, scarred over, but still tender like her own leg. She finally sat her stick across her lap. I'm sorry about your family. So am I. But sorry doesn't bring them back. Sorry doesn't change anything. All we can do is keep going. The coffee boiled. He poured 2 cups, set one in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it, feeling the warmth seep into fingers she hadn't realized were cold. Tell me about the fever, he said, sitting across from her. She looked into the dark liquid, seeing her reflection warped and broken. I was 11. My mother, my real mother, had died 2 years before. Childbirth. The baby, too. My father, he was a traitor, half Mexican, half something else he never talked about. He died in a raid when I was 9. Chief Karuk took me in, said I could be useful. I was young, strong, smart. I learned Apache ways, learned English from the missionaries who came through. I was going to be something. She took a sip, the bitterness matching her memories. Then came the horse. A stallion, black as midnight, wild as wind. The chief's son dared me to ride it. Said if I could stay on for a count of 50, he'd teach me to use a bow. She laughed short and sharp. I made it to 30 before it threw me. Landed hard, leg twisted under me. The bone broke, came through the skin. Samuel winced. He'd seen enough injuries to know how bad that was. The medicine man said it, but the fever came anyway. Burned for 7 days. The missionary's doctor was gone, traveling to another settlement. By the time he returned, the damage was done. My eye clouded over. The leg healed wrong. And suddenly, I wasn't useful anymore. I was a burden. A reminder that even the chief's protection couldn't stand against bad luck. That wasn't bad luck. That was a boy's cruelty and poor medical care. She looked up at him surprised. The spirits didn't make that boy dare you onto a wild horse. The spirits didn't make the doctor be absent when you needed him. People did that. People failed you, then blamed the spirits to avoid their own guilt. You don't believe in curses. I believe in consequences. I believe in cruelty. I believe in kindness. But curses, no. You're not cursed. You're hurt. There's a difference. She set down her cup, her hand shaking slightly. Everyone says I'm cursed. Everyone said the earth was flat once too. Didn't make it true. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The sound made Alara flinch. It sounded too much like the rattles the medicine man had shaken over her during the fever, trying to drive out the evil spirits. Samuel noticed. What else happened during the fever? She closed her good eye, memory pulling her back. They tried everything. The medicine man danced for 3 days. The missionaries prayed over me when they returned. The chief's wife, she was kind to me. Then she stayed by my side, cooling my head with wet cloths. But nothing worked. The fever just burned and burned until there was nothing left to burn. But you survived. Part of me did. She opened her eye, looked at him straight. The part that knew how to be useful died. The part that could run, could dance, could be a wife to someone important, that all died. What survived was this. She gestured to herself with bitter emphasis. I see a woman who survived something that would have killed most people. I see someone who learned 2 languages, who can read and write, who stood up in that square today when anyone else would have stayed down. That's not nothing. That's everything. Pretty words don't change ugly truths. No, but ugly truths don't erase beautiful ones either. He stood, moved to the window, looked out at the gathering dusk. Sarah used to say that life was like metal in the forge. The heat and hammering hurt, but they're what shape us into something useful, something strong. What did the heat shape you into? He turned back to her. Someone who knows that being alone isn't the worst thing. Being with people who make you feel worthless, that's worse. Being with people who only see what you can do for them, that's worse. But being alone, that's just quiet. Is that why you live out here? Partly. Also because the sound of the forge bothers folks. And because. He paused, seeming to weigh his words. Because in town, everyone looks at me and sees what I lost. Out here, I can just be what I am now. What are you now? Tired, he admitted. Tired of carrying grief like a millstone. Tired of people crossing the street to avoid talking to me because they don't know what to say. Tired of being Samuel Hart, the man who lost everything. Some days I just want to be Sam the blacksmith. Is that wrong? No, she said softly. I understand. I'm tired of being Elara the cursed, the broken one, the burden. Some days I dream about being nobody, just disappearing into the desert and becoming wind. That's not becoming nobody. That's becoming nothing. There's a difference. Is there? Nobody still exists. Nobody still takes up space. Breathes air, needs food and water. Nothing is nothing. It's giving up. It's letting them win. Who's them? Everyone who ever made you feel like you were less than human. Everyone who looked at your leg and your eye and decided that's all you were. Every person who called you cursed instead of asking your name. His voice had gone hard like iron under the hammer. Sarah taught me something before she died. She said the only real curse is letting other people's opinions become your truth. Elara was quiet for a long moment. Then, she sounds wise. She was. She was also stubborn as a mule and couldn't cook beans to save her life. A small smile touched his lips. But she could sing. Lord, could she sing. Used to sing Thomas to sleep every night. Some nights I still hear it on the wind. What did she sing? Hymns mostly, but also old songs from her grandmother. Songs about crossing rivers and climbing mountains and finding home on the other side. His voice had gone soft. I'd give anything to hear them again. I could. Elara started, then stopped. You could what? Nothing. It's foolish. Tell me anyway. She took a breath. I could sing sometimes. If you wanted. I don't know hymns, but I know other songs. Mexican songs from my father. A few Apache songs from before they decided I wasn't worth teaching anymore. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. I'd like that, he said simply, but only if you want to. Not because you think you owe me. How do I know the difference? You'll know. When you do something because you want to, it feels different than when you do it because you have to. It feels like taking a deep breath after being underwater. Like the first drink of cold water on a hot day. Like freedom, she finished. Yes, like freedom. The cabin had grown dark while they talked. Samuel lit a lantern, the warm glow pushing shadows into corners. Outside, coyotes began their evening chorus, their calls echoing across the desert. You must be hungry, he said. I'm used to hunger. That's going to change. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and cornbread. Sometimes I trap rabbits. There's a creek not far where I catch fish sometimes. I can cook, she offered. If you'll let me. I'll let you do anything you want to do. But tonight, you rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. He moved to the stove, started pulling out supplies. She watched him work, this strange man who spoke of grief like an old friend, who offered freedom like it was simple as water. She didn't trust it, not yet. Trust had been burned out of her along with the fever, but for the first time in years, she felt something besides resignation. Maybe it was the coffee warming her stomach. Maybe it was the solid walls around her. Maybe it was the way he'd stood up to Chief Karuk, spending a fortune on principle alone. Or maybe it was the way he spoke of his dead wife and son, not with the raw agony of fresh loss, but with the deep ache of love that endures past death. Whatever it was, she felt it a tiny spark of something that might, if carefully tended, grow into hope. The beans were simple, but filling the cornbread rough but warm. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the scrape of spoons against tin plates and the crackle of the fire. Elara found herself stealing glances at Samuel, trying to reconcile this quiet, careful man with the one who'd thrown down $20 like it was nothing. When they finished, she stood to clear the plates. Her bad leg buckled, and she grabbed the table edge, cursing softly in Apache. Leave them, Samuel said. I can manage. I know you can, but you don't have to prove it tonight. She sat back down, frustrated. If I don't work, what am I? Tired, hurt, human. Take your pick. Humans work. Humans also rest. When's the last time you truly rested, not collapsed from exhaustion, not stolen a moment between tasks, but actually rested? She couldn't remember. Even before the fever, there had always been something gathering wood, preparing food, mending, tending. After the fever, the work had doubled because everything took her twice as long. I don't know how to rest, she admitted. Then learn, starting tonight. He stood, gathered the plates himself. You take the bed, I'll take the floor. No. The word came out sharp, panicked almost. I can't take your bed. It's not mine anymore. It's yours. Samuel, please. The word was soft but firm. Let me do this one thing right today. She wanted to argue, but something in his voice stopped her. This wasn't about her, not really. This was about him needing to feel like he could still do good in the world. She understood that need. All right, she said, but tomorrow we'll figure out tomorrow. He pulled blankets from a trunk, made himself a pallet by the stove. It looked uncomfortable, but he didn't complain. She limped to the bed, sat on its edge. The mattress was filled with straw, but it felt like clouds compared to the ground she usually slept on. Samuel? Yeah. Why the new chair? The one you had me sit in. You made it recently, didn't you? He was quiet for a moment. I made it last month. I don't know why. Just felt like something I needed to do. Maybe I knew you were coming. You don't believe in spirits and curses, but you believe in premonitions. I believe in being prepared, and I believe that sometimes our hands know things before our heads do. She lay down carefully, her body crying out in relief as muscles finally relaxed. The pillow smelled of sage and cedar. Above her, she could see stars through a small window, the same stars she'd watched from a dozen different camps, 100 different nights. But they looked different from here, safer somehow. Samuel, yeah, thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't tried my coffee in the morning. It's been known to strip paint. Despite everything, she smiled in the darkness. Sleep came slowly for both of them. Samuel lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing gradually deepen and slow. It had been 3 years since another person had slept under his roof. The sound was both foreign and familiar, like a song in a language you used to know. Ilara dozed fitfully, startling awake every time the cabin creaked or the wind shifted. Each time she had to remember where she was, that the walls around her were protection, not prison, that the man sleeping by the stove had paid gold for her freedom, not her servitude. Dawn came pale and gradual, the desert light seeping through cracks in windows like water finding its level. Samuel woke first, as was his habit, moving quietly to avoid disturbing her. But she was already awake, had been for an hour, watching the light grow and trying to understand how her life had changed so completely between one sunset and the next. Morning, he said softly. Morning. How's the leg? Still there. That's good. Be worried if it wasn't. She sat up slowly, working out the stiffness. You always wake this early. Forge takes time to heat properly. I like to get it started before breakfast. I could make breakfast while you work. He considered this. If you want to, not because I have to. I know, but I want to. I need to do something, to be useful. You don't need to be useful to be worth something. Maybe not, but I need to be useful to feel worth something. Does that make sense? More than you know. He showed her where things were, the flour, the lard, the eggs he gathered from 3 chickens that roosted behind the cabin, the coffee which was indeed strong enough to wake the dead. Then he went to his forge, leaving her to navigate his kitchen in her own way at her own pace. She moved carefully, mindful of her leg, but found a rhythm. The stove was finicky, but she dealt with worse. The skillets were well seasoned, the tools clean. Everything spoke of a man who took care of what was his, even in grief. By the time Samuel returned, she had biscuits baking and eggs frying. The coffee was ready. She'd made it slightly weaker than his usual, adding a precious pinch of cinnamon she'd found hidden behind the salt. He stopped in the doorway, surprise clear on his face. The cabin smelled like food, like life, like home. For a moment, grief hit him like a physical blow. Sarah used to cook breakfast while he worked. The smell would draw him back, and they'd eat together while Thomas chattered about whatever dream he'd had, or bug he'd found, or story he'd invented. Elara saw his face change, saw the pain flash through his eyes. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "No." He stepped inside, composing himself. "No, it's good. It's just been a while since anyone cooked here besides me, and I'm a terrible cook." "The beans weren't terrible. You're being kind." "I'm being honest. I've had worse, much worse." They ate together, the morning light streaming through the windows. The biscuits were light, the eggs perfect. The coffee, even weakened, could still probably strip paint, but the hint of cinnamon made it almost pleasant. "Where did you learn to cook?" he asked. "Everywhere. My father when he was alive. The chief's wife before she decided I was cursed. The missionaries. Even picked up a few things from a Chinese man who passed through once. He showed me how to make rice stick together right." "You remember all that?" "When you're hungry enough, you remember everything about food." After breakfast, she insisted on cleaning up while he returned to the forge. She could hear the ring of hammer on anvil, a steady rhythm that became the heartbeat of the morning. When she finished, she limped outside to watch. The forge was a separate building, open on one side to let heat escape. Samuel stood before the anvil, shaping what looked like a horseshoe. His movements were precise, economical. The way he handled the metal firm, but not forcing guiding rather than demanding, reminded her of how he'd helped her from the wagon. Strength controlled by choice. He noticed her watching and paused. "Want to see how it works?" She nodded, moving closer. The heat hit her like a wall, but she didn't retreat. "Iron's like people," he said, pumping the bellows to brighten the coals. "Heat it too fast, it becomes brittle. Too slow, it won't take shape. You have to find the right temperature, the right rhythm." He pulled the horseshoe from the fire, glowing orange-white. "Then you have to know when to strike and when to let it rest." He brought the hammer down, each blow deliberate. The metal sang under his hands, changing shape with each impact. She watched, mesmerized by the transformation. "Can I try?" He looked at her surprised. "It's hard work. Your leg." "I can stand. I want to learn." He considered, then nodded. "Start small." He selected a piece of scrap iron, heated it to the right glow. "The hammer's heavy. Don't try to muscle it. Let the weight do the work." She took the hammer, surprised by its heft. Her first blow was weak, barely denting the metal. The second went wide, missing entirely. But the third connected solid and true, and she felt the satisfaction of metal yielding to intent. "Good," Samuel said. "Again." They worked through the morning, him guiding her learning. Her leg ached, her arm grew tired, but she didn't stop. There was something healing in the work, in creating, rather than just surviving. "You're a natural," he said as she successfully shaped a simple nail. "I'm stubborn." "Same thing sometimes." As the sun climbed toward noon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Samuel tensed his hand, moving instinctively toward the hammer. Visitors were rare and rarely brought good news. The rider resolved into Jake Morrison, one of the younger men from town. He pulled up at a respectful distance, eyeing Elara with poorly disguised curiosity. "Sam," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Jake." "Heard about yesterday, at the trading post." "I'm sure you did. People are talking." "People always talk." Jake shifted in his saddle. "Just thought you should know. Some folks are saying you've lost your mind, taking in an Apache woman, and a cursed one at that. Some folks should mind their own business." "Maybe so, but the preacher's planning to ride out here. Wants to save your soul, or some such." Samuel's jaw tightened. My soul's my own concern. I'm just warning you is all. You know how he gets when he thinks someone's straying from the path. I know. Thanks for the warning. Jake started to turn his horse, then paused. She really cursed. No, Samuel said firmly. She's not. Jake looked at Alara directly for the first time. She met his gaze steadily with her good eye, refusing to look away or look down. Ma'am, Jake said, finally touching his hat brim. It wasn't much, but it was more respect than she'd been shown in years. After he rode off, Samuel turned to her. The preacher will come, probably tomorrow. He'll say things, ugly things. You don't have to listen. I've heard ugly things before. Not in your own home, you haven't. This isn't my home. Yes, he said firmly. It is, for as long as you want it to be. That afternoon, clouds built on the horizon, purple dark and promising rain. The desert needed it, the land cracked and thirsty, but Alara watched them with unease. Rain meant storms, and storms meant memories of that night when the fever peaked, when lightning split the sky, and thunder shook the earth, and she thought the world was ending. Samuel noticed her tension. Just rain, he said. The roof's sound. We'll be dry. I know. But when the first thunder rolled across the desert, she flinched. When lightning flickered in the distance, she gripped the table edge until her knuckles went white. Alara. Samuel's voice was gentle. What is it? The night the fever broke, there was a storm. The medicine man said the thunder was spirits fighting over my soul. The lightning was them trying to claim me. I was so scared, more scared than I'd ever been. And alone. They'd all left me alone to face it. Without thinking, Samuel reached across the table, covered her hand with his. You're not alone now. She looked at their hands, his scarred and strong, hers trembling, but steadying under his touch. Why do you care what happens to me? Because someone should. Because you deserve to have someone care. Because... He paused, searching for words. Because maybe in helping you heal, I can remember what it feels like to be whole. The rain came then hard and sudden drumming on the roof, like 1,000 fingers. But inside the cabin was warm and dry, lit by lantern light, filled with the smell of coffee and bread. And for the first time since the fever, Alara wasn't facing the storm alone. The storm passed in the night, leaving the desert washed clean and smelling of sage and wet earth. Alara woke to find Samuel already gone to the forge, the steady ring of his hammer, a comfort she was starting to depend on. She rose, tested her legs, still stiff, always would be, and set about making breakfast. She was stirring oatmeal when she heard horses approaching, multiple horses. Her hand tightened on the spoon as memories flooded back, raider soldiers, hunting parties. Groups of men on horses rarely brought anything good. Samuel appeared in the doorway, his face grim. It's the preacher. Brought some of the town council with him. Stay inside if you want. You don't have to. I'll face them, she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Running just makes them chase harder. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. We face them together then. The delegation dismounted near the cabin. Reverend Josiah Mills led them, a tall scarecrow of a man whose interpretation of Christian charity seemed to extend only to those he deemed worthy. Behind him came Thomas Brennan, who owned the general store, and Edgar Hutchins, the banker whose wife had dropped her basket yesterday. Samuel. The Reverend said, his voice carrying that particular tone of condescension dressed as concern. We've come to talk sense into you. Nothing sensible about riding 5 miles uninvited to a man's home, Samuel replied, standing between them and the cabin door. We're worried about your soul, brother. My soul's fine. Is it you've taken in a heathen woman, an Apache, and from what we hear, a cursed one at that? She's not cursed. She's not a heathen. And she's welcome here. The banker stepped forward. Sam, be reasonable. You're a respected man in this community, a skilled tradesman. This association, it's beneath you. What's beneath me is standing here, listening to you judge a woman you don't know. We know enough, the Reverend said. She's Apache. They're savages who've killed countless Christians. She's marked by God's disfavor, the eye, the leg, clear signs of divine judgment. That's when Elara stepped outside. She'd changed into her best dress, still worn but clean. She'd braided her hair properly. She stood as straight as her leg allowed her walking stick planted firm. When she spoke, her English was clear and precise, each word carefully chosen. "Reverend Mills, I know you. You came to the reservation 2 winters ago. You preached about Christ's love for all God's children. You said he healed the lame and gave sight to the blind. You said he ate with tax collectors and sinners. Tell me, Reverend, which part of your Christ's teaching says you should cast out the injured?" The Reverend's face flushed. "You dare quote Scripture at me. I dare remind you of it. Matthew chapter 9, verse 12. They that be whole need not a physician, but they that are sick. Luke chapter 14, verses 13 and 14. When thou makest a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and thou shalt be blessed." Should I continue? Sister Catherine made sure I knew my Bible. The devil can quote Scripture for his purpose. The Reverend sputtered. "So can hypocrites," Samuel said quietly. "Seemed to recall something about removing the beam from your own eye before worrying about the mote in your brother's." The banker tried a different approach. "Sam, think practically. What happens when her people come looking for her? You could bring violence to our community." "Her people threw her away," Samuel said, his voice hard. "Traded her for a joke. I'm the one who claimed her. She's under my protection now." "You can't just claim an Apache woman like she's property," the Reverend protested. "I didn't claim her as property. I claimed her as family." The word hung in the air, surprising everyone, including Samuel himself. But once said, he didn't take it back. "And in this territory, a man has the right to decide who's family and who's not." "You'd make this savage your family?" the banker asked, incredulous. "I'd make this woman my wife," Samuel said, and the morning went absolutely silent. Elara's good eye widened. They hadn't discussed this. They'd barely known each other 2 days. But she understood immediately what he was doing, giving her protection that even these men couldn't challenge. A legal status that would force them to recognize her as more than property or burden. "You can't be serious," the Reverend said. "Dead serious. In fact, since you're here, Reverend, you can perform the ceremony." "I will not sanctify such an unholy union." "Then I'll find someone who will. Judge Carter, maybe. He's got the legal authority, and he owes me for fixing his wagon last winter." "This is madness," the banker declared. "No," Samuel said. "Madness is riding out here to tell me how to live my life. Madness is calling a woman cursed because she survived something that should have killed her. Madness is preaching God's love on Sunday and practicing hate the rest of the week." He turned to Elara. "I should have asked you first. I'm sorry. You don't have to." "Yes," she said simply. "You don't know what you're agreeing to." "I'm agreeing to survival, to protection, to a chance at a life that's more than scraps and shadows." She looked at the 3 men. "Unless you gentlemen have a better offer, will you take me into your homes, give me work, treat me as human?" Their silence was answer enough. "Then yes," she said to Samuel. "I accept." The Reverend pulled himself up to his full height. "This is a mistake you'll both regret. When God's judgment falls, then we'll face it together," Samuel interrupted. "Now get off my land." The delegation mounted their horses, but the Reverend had one last shot to fire. "No decent person in town will do business with you after this." "Then I'll do business with the indecent ones. They're usually more honest anyway." After they rode off, Samuel and Elara stood in the morning sun, the weight of what just happened settling on them like dust. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I shouldn't have put you in that position. You gave me a choice. That's more than anyone's done in years. It doesn't have to be real, the marriage. We can just let them think, no." She turned to face him fully. "If we're doing this, we do it real, legal, binding. I won't live in another lie, another half-life. Either I'm your wife or I'm not. Either this is my home or it's not. You barely know me. I know you stood up for me when no one else would. I know you gave me your bed while you slept on the floor. I know you see me as human when everyone else sees me as broken." She paused. "I know you're grieving a family you loved. I won't try to replace them. But maybe we can build something new. Something that's ours." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, looking at this woman who'd been thrust into his life just yesterday, but somehow felt like she'd always belonged there. "You're sure?" "I'm sure I want to try. I'm sure I'm tired of being alone. I'm sure that you're a good man in a world that's running short of them." She managed a small smile. "I'm also sure you need someone who can actually cook, or you'll die of beans and burnt coffee." Despite everything, he smiled back. "Judge Carter lives in town. We could go today." Looking like this, she gestured to her worn dress. "No. If I'm going to be married, I'm going to look like a woman, not a beggar." "You look fine." "I look like what I am, someone wearing charity clothes and hard years. Give me a day, maybe two. Let me at least try to be worthy of this." "You're already worthy." "Then let me feel worthy." Can you understand that? He could. He remembered Sarah fussing over her dress the day they married, even though they had almost nothing and were getting married in a courthouse. Dignity mattered. Choosing how you presented yourself to the world mattered. "Take all the time you need," he said. "This isn't about them. It's about us." That afternoon, while Samuel worked at the forge, Alara took inventory of what she had to work with. One worn dress, a few pieces of cloth, Samuel's sewing kit, basic but functional. She could make something, not fancy but decent, respectable. She was measuring cloth when Samuel came in carrying something wrapped in brown paper. "What's that?" she asked. "Something I've been meaning to get rid of. Might as well put it to use." He set the package on the table, unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a dress, simple but well-made dark blue cotton with small white buttons. Sarah's dress, Alara realized immediately. "I can't wear this," she said. "Why not?" "It was hers. And she's not using it anymore." His voice was steady, but she heard the emotion underneath. Sarah was practical. She'd hate the waste of it sitting in a trunk when someone needed it. "But it needs taking in." Sarah was taller, and the hem needs adjusting, but the fabric's good. The color would suit you. Alara touched the dress, gently feeling the quality of the cotton. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure she'd approve." Sarah believed in making do and moving forward. "She'd like you, I think. You're both survivors." She was a survivor. Came west in a wagon train when she was 12, lost her parents to cholera on the trail, raised her younger brother alone until he was old enough to fend for himself. She knew what it was to have nothing and build something anyway. "How did you meet her?" A small smile touched his lips. "She brought me a broken pot to fix. Stood there and told me I was doing it wrong. She was right, too. Kept coming back with broken things until I figured out she was breaking them on purpose just to have an excuse to visit." "She sounds wonderful." She was. But she's gone, and you're here, and life moves forward whether we want it to or not. He paused. "That's not fair to you. Making you wear her dress, marry her widower, live in her house." "I'm not her," Alara said carefully. "I won't try to be. I know, I don't want you to be. I want you to be you. But you should have your own things, your own choices. This is my choice. And the dress. It's just cloth and thread. What matters is what we make of it." She picked up the dress, held it against herself. "Will you help me pin it? My eye makes it hard to judge straight lines." They spent the evening adjusting the dress, Samuel holding fabric, while Alara pinned and marked. Their hands brushed occasionally, each touch carrying more weight than it should. By lamplight, with the dress taking shape, something else was taking shape too. A partnership born of necessity, but growing into something more. "There," Alara said finally. "I can finish the sewing tomorrow. It'll look good on you." think it will be enough to shut up the Reverend. Nothing would be enough for him. But this isn't about him. Samuel paused. Alara, are you really sure marriage is... It's permanent. So is being alone. At least this way we're alone together. That's a hell of a foundation for a marriage. People have built on worse. At least we're honest about what this is. What is this? She considered the question. A chance, for both of us, to be more than what loss made us. The next morning brought unexpected visitors, not hostile this time, but curious. Mary Chen, wife of the Chinese merchant who ran a small goods store at the edge of town, arrived in a cart with her daughter Lily. Mary was one of the few people in Silver Creek who understood what it meant to be seen as other, as less than. Heard there's to be a wedding, Mary said, climbing down from the cart with a bundle in her arms. Thought you might need some things. Alara stood in the doorway, wary but hopeful. Why would you help me? Because when I came here 8 years ago, fresh off the boat, married to a man I'd never met speaking barely any English, everyone looked at me the way they look at you. Like I was something strange, something wrong. Mary's smile was knowing. Sarah Hart was the only one who treated me like a person. Figured I owed her memory that much. She handed over the bundle rice-dried fish, precious ginger root, and at the bottom a piece of red silk. For luck, Mary explained. In my culture, red means good fortune, happiness. You'll need both. I can't pay. Not asking for payment, asking for friendship. We outsiders need to stick together. Samuel emerged from the forge, wiping his hands on his leather apron. Mrs. Chen, good to see you. Mr. Hart, congratulations on your upcoming marriage. News travels fast. Bad news travels fast. Good news travels faster because it's rarer. She looked between them. This is good news whether the town knows it or not. After Mary left, promising to return for the wedding, Ilara held the red silk against the light. I could make something with this. A sash, maybe, or trim for the dress. Whatever you want. She spent the day sewing while Samuel worked. The rhythm of needle through fabric matched the rhythm of hammer on anvil, two people working separately, but in harmony. By evening, the dress was ready altered to fit with a thin line of red silk at the collar and cuffs. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. Try it on, Samuel suggested. Turn around. We're getting married tomorrow. And tonight, you turn around. He smiled, but complied. She changed quickly, the fabric settling around her differently than her worn Apache dress. When she looked down at herself, she saw someone new. Not Apache, not white, but something in between, something unique. Okay, she said. He turned, and his breath caught slightly. Not because she was beautiful in the conventional sense. The clouded eye and uneven stance prevented that. But because she looked like herself. Strong despite everything. Dignified despite all attempts to strip it from her. Real in a way that mattered. You look. He searched for words. Right. You look right. Not beautiful. Beautiful is easy. Lots of things are beautiful. You're more than that. You're... He paused, then found it. Remarkable. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. Samuel Hart, are you courting me? Bit late for that, isn't it? We're getting married tomorrow. Never too late for kindness. They ate dinner together, rice with beans flavored with some of Mary's ginger. It was different, the mixing of traditions, but it worked. Like them, perhaps. Are you afraid, Ilar asked as they cleaned up. Of marriage, of what people will do. The Reverend won't let this go easily. Let him rage. I've got work to do, and now someone to do it for. He paused. Are you afraid? Yes, but not of them. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you, that you'll wake up one day and realize you traded $20 for damaged goods. You're not goods damaged or otherwise. You're a person, and people aren't for trading. He dried the last plate, set it carefully on the shelf. I'm afraid too. Afraid I'll fail you like I failed them. You didn't fail your family. Disease took them. I know that here, he touched his head. But here, he touched his chest. I still feel like I should have done more, been more. More than what more than human, maybe. She reached out, touched his hand. Human is enough. Human is all we can be. That night, they sat outside watching the stars. The desert was quiet except for the distant yip of coyotes and the whisper of wind through sage. Alara's walking stick rested against her chair, Samuel's hammer against his. Tools of survival, different but necessary. Tell me about the stars, Samuel said. What did your people call them? The Apache sea hunters and animals. That group there, she pointed, is the mountain sheep. Those are the thunder people. And that bright one is the seed star. When it appears at dawn, it's time to plant. Sarah used to say the stars were holes in the floor of heaven, letting God's light through. What do you think they are? Lights. Beautiful, distant lights that don't care about our troubles, but make us feel less alone anyway. That's poetic for a blacksmith. Even blacksmiths have thoughts. We just beat them into shape instead of speaking them. She smiled. Will you teach me more about metalwork? If you want. It's hard work. Everything's hard work when your leg doesn't work right. At least with metalwork, I'd be creating something. Then I'll teach you. We'll start with nails. Everyone needs nails. The Reverend was wrong, you know, about you doing business. People need what you make too much to let prejudice stop them. Maybe, or maybe we'll starve with dignity. I've tried starving. Dignity tastes better, but it's not very filling. He laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. It transformed his face, showing the man he'd been before grief carved its marks on him. We should sleep, he said finally. Tomorrow's a big day. Our wedding day, she said, testing the words. Having second thoughts? No. Third and fourth thoughts maybe. But not second. Inside, he started to prepare his pallet by the stove. Samuel. Yeah. After tomorrow, you won't have to sleep on the floor. He went very still. Ilara, I'm not saying. I'm not ready for, but the bed's big enough for 2 people to sleep. Just sleep. Without, she struggled for words. Without it meaning more than sleep. You trust me that much? I'm marrying you. Trust has to start somewhere. Then tomorrow, after we're married, we'll share the bed. Just sleep. Just sleep, she agreed, though her heart beat faster at the thought. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Ilara woke early nerves dancing in her stomach. She braided her hair, carefully pinning it with 2 wooden combs Samuel had carved for her the night before his wedding gift. He'd said, looking embarrassed. Samuel shaved for the first time since she'd met him, revealing a younger face beneath the stubble. He put on his best shirt, the one with only 2 patches. They looked at each other across the cabin and burst out laughing, not bitter laughter, but the kind that comes from recognizing absurdity and choosing joy anyway. Ready? He asked. No, but let's go anyway. The ride to town felt both longer and shorter than usual. Ilara wore the blue dress with its red trim, a shawl Mary had included draped over her shoulders. Samuel had polished his boots and combed his hair. They looked like what they were, 2 people making the best of what they had. Judge Carter's office sat above the land registry, reached by stairs that Ilara climbed slowly, Samuel's hand steady at her elbow. The judge himself was a small round man with shrewd eyes and a whiskey-red nose. Sam Hart, he said, not quite hiding his surprise. And this must be Ilara, soon to be Ilara Hart. The Apache woman. The woman, Samuel corrected firmly. Right. Well, the judge shuffled papers unnecessarily. You sure about this, Sam? There's been talk. There's always talk. We're here for a marriage, not a sermon. I have to ask, this is of your own free will, both of you. Yes, they said in unison. And you understand that marriage is a legal bond recognized by the territory of New Mexico. We understand, Samuel said. And you miss. I understand. Elara said clearly. I understand exactly what I'm choosing. The judge looked between them, perhaps seeing something in their faces that surprised him. Well then, I'll need witnesses. We brought them, Samuel said. Mary Chen entered with her husband Lee, followed surprisingly by Jake Morrison, the young man who'd warned them about the preacher. Jake, Samuel said, figured you needed someone from town who wasn't against you. Besides, he looked slightly embarrassed. My grandmother was Comanche. Never told anyone, but I know what it's like to have blood that doesn't match your skin. The ceremony was brief, the legal minimum. But when the judge asked if they took each other as husband and wife, their yes rang with more conviction than many elaborate church weddings. You may kiss your bride, the judge said. Samuel turned to Elara. They'd never kissed, never touched beyond the necessary. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met briefly, a promise more than passion, but real nonetheless. I now pronounce you man and wife. May God have mercy on your souls. Outside they found a small crowd gathered. Some faces were hostile, others curious, a few quietly supportive. The Reverend stood at the front, his face purple with rage. This is an abomination, he shouted. This is legal, Samuel replied calmly. Judge Carter has the authority, the papers are signed. She's my wife now. The town won't stand for this. Then the town can sit. Elara said, surprising everyone. We're not asking for your blessing, Reverend. We're not asking for anything except to be left in peace. An older woman pushed through the crowd, Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband had died in a mine collapse 2 years back. I need 3 horseshoes and a new pot handle, she said to Samuel, ignoring the Reverend entirely. When can you have them ready? Tuesday. Samuel said, grateful. I'll be by then. She looked at Elara. Welcome to Silver Creek, Mrs. Hart. It's not much, but it's home. Others followed her lead. Not many, but enough. People who needed Samuel's work more than they needed the Reverend's approval. By the time they climbed back in the wagon, they had enough orders to keep busy for a week. The ride home was quiet, both of them processing what had just happened. They were married, legally bound. The wooden combs in Elara's hair caught the light as she turned to look at him. No going back now, she said. Do you want to go back? No. Forward is the only direction I know anymore. That evening, they prepared dinner together for the first time as husband and wife. The work was the same, cutting vegetables, stirring pots, but it felt different, weighted with meaning. When their hands brushed, reaching for the same spoon, neither pulled away. I should tell you, Elara said as they ate. I can't have children. The fever, the damage it did. The medicine man said, I'm barren. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Does it bother you? It used to. Now, I don't know. Does it bother you? I had a child. I lost him. I'm not looking to replace what can't be replaced. He met her eyes. This marriage isn't about children. It's about us. What if there is no us? What if we're just 2 broken people sharing a roof? Then we're 2 broken people who chose to share a roof. That's still something. Maybe it becomes more, maybe it doesn't. But it's something. When darkness fell and time came for bed, they stood awkwardly on opposite sides of it. This is ridiculous, Elara finally said. We're married. We're adults. We can share a bed without it being more than sharing warmth. Right. Samuel agreed, though his voice was tight. They lay down carefully, fully clothed backs to each other, a careful space between them. The bed felt enormous and tiny at the same time. Samuel, yeah, thank you for today, for all of it. Thank you for saying yes. Did I have a choice? You always had a choice. You still do. She rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. What if I choose to stay? Then you stay. What if I choose more than staying? He was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then we'll figure out what more means. Together. She reached across the space between them, found his hand. He laced his fingers through hers, and they lay there in the darkness, married strangers becoming something else. Not yet, lovers more than friends. Something new, built from broken pieces and careful hope. Outside, a screech owl called its cry, echoing across the desert. Inside, two people held hands and held on, building a home, not from wood and nails, but from the choice to stay, to try to become. The first weeks of marriage passed in careful navigation. They learned each other's rhythms. Samuel rose before dawn. Alara needed time to work the stiffness from her leg. He liked his coffee strong enough to float iron. She preferred tea when they could get it. He worked in focused silence. She hummed Apache songs under her breath while cooking. They shared the bed each night, a careful distance between them that gradually shrank. First, their hands would find each other in sleep. Then Alara would wake with her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, both pretending it meant nothing, both knowing it meant everything. The town's reaction was mixed. The Reverend preached sermons about the corruption of good Christian men, never naming Samuel directly, but leaving no doubt. Some people crossed the street to avoid them, but others, like Mrs. Rodriguez and the Chens, continued their business as usual. And a few those with their own secrets, their own otherness, became quietly supportive. It was the fourth week when family arrived. Alara was tending the small garden. She'd started herbs and vegetables coaxed from the desert soil when she saw riders approaching. Her body tensed, hand moving instinctively to the knife at her belt. Then she recognized the lead rider, and her blood went cold. Samuel. She called, her voice tight. He emerged from the forge, took one look at her face, and grabbed his hammer. But when he saw who it was, he set it down slowly. 3 Apache riders approached, not Chief Karuk, but younger men. The one in front was Thomas Crow Feather, the brave who'd tossed Alara her walking stick that day at the trading post. They stopped at a respectful distance, hands visible, weapons sheathed. "Sister," Thomas said in Apache, then switched to English for Samuel's benefit. "We come in peace." "I'm not your sister anymore," Alara replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Thomas had always been kind to her, even after the fever. Blood doesn't wash away with words. The chief's words, or yours. "What do you want?" Samuel asked, stepping closer to Alara. Thomas studied him for a long moment. "To know she's well. To bring news." "I'm well," Alara said quickly. "You can go." "The chief is dead." The words hung in the air like smoke. Alara's good eye widened. "When?" "3 days ago." His heart gave out in the night. "He called for you at the end." "He threw me away." "He was a proud fool, but still your father in his way." "He was never my father. He made that clear." Thomas dismounted slowly, reached into his pack. Samuel tensed, but the Apache pulled out a small bundle wrapped in hide. "These were your mother's, your real mother's. The chief kept them all these years. His wife, she wanted you to have them." Alara's hands shook as she took the bundle. Inside were small things, a silver comb, a string of turquoise beads, a small leather pouch containing seeds. "Desert willow seeds," Thomas explained. "Your mother loved the flowers, said they reminded her of hope." Tears ran down Alara's face before she could stop them. Samuel's hand found her shoulder steady and supportive. "There's more," Thomas continued. "The tribe is splitting. Some want to continue the old ways, raiding and fighting. Others want peace, want to find a way to live alongside the whites. I lead those who want peace." "Why tell us this?" Samuel asked. "Because borders are changing. The army is coming to force us onto smaller reservations. We need friends among the whites, people who might speak for us." "I'm nobody," Alara said. "My word means nothing. You're the wife of a respected tradesman. You can read and write in English. You know both worlds." Thomas looked at Samuel. "And you're a man who paid $20 for what others saw as worthless. That story has traveled. It makes people think." "Think what? That maybe there's another way than hatred." After they left, Alara sat in her chair by the fire holding her mother's things. Samuel worked quietly at the forge, giving her space to grieve. When he finally came in, she was planting the desert willow seeds in a pot. "They might not grow," she said, "but they might. Like us. Like us." That night, she told him stories of her childhood before the fever. Her real mother singing in Spanish, her father's laughter, the brief time when she belonged somewhere fully. He told her about teaching Thomas to whittle Sarah's terrible attempts at making bread, the way grief had made him forget joy existed. "We're like those seeds," she said as they lay in bed, "planted in hard ground, not sure if we'll grow, but trying anyway." She rolled toward him closer than she'd ever been while awake. "Samuel, yeah, I'm glad it was you. At the trading post. I'm glad you were the one who stood up." "So am I." She kissed him, then different from their wedding kiss. This was choice, not ceremony. His arms came around her, careful of her leg, and for a moment, the broken pieces felt whole. 3 days later, the army arrived. Captain William Harrison rode at the head of 20 soldiers, their uniforms dusty but weapons clean. They stopped at the cabin, dismounting with military precision. "Mr. Hart," the captain said. "Mrs. Hart." The acknowledgement of her married name was significant. The army could have challenged, it could have claimed the marriage invalid. Captain Samuel replied, "What brings you here?" "Reports of Apache activity in the area. We're investigating." Thomas Crowfeather came by. "Peaceful visit. They left 3 days ago." "You're harboring Apache." "I'm talking to my wife's relatives," Samuel said firmly. "Last I checked, that wasn't illegal." The captain studied Ilara. "You're Apache. I'm a Hart now, but Apache by blood, and human by nature. What's your point?" "Captain." The man's jaw tightened. "There are those who say this marriage is a sham, that you're a spy for your people." "Those people are idiots," Samuel said flatly. "My wife was thrown away by her people. She owes them nothing." "Still, it's unusual, a white man marrying an Apache." "Unusual isn't illegal." "No, but it raises questions." "Then ask them." The captain dismounted, walked closer. "Very well. Mrs. Hart, would you be willing to help us? Your knowledge of Apache language and customs could prevent bloodshed." "Help how? Translation, mediation. The government wants to move the Apache to reservations peacefully, if possible. Someone who could help both sides understand each other." "Would be useful to you." Ilara finished. "What's in it for us? Protection, official recognition of your marriage, payment for your services." Samuel and Ilara exchanged glances. It was dangerous putting her between two worlds that way. But it was also opportunity. "I'll consider it," Ilara said finally. "Don't consider too long. Things are moving fast." After the army left, they sat together in silence, weighing options. "It could get you killed," Samuel said finally. "Both sides might see you as a traitor, or both sides might see me as a bridge." "That's optimistic." "I'm practicing." She managed a small smile. Sarah was optimistic, wasn't she? To a fault. Maybe that's what this place needs. Foolish optimism. You could get hurt. I'm already hurt. At least this way the hurt might mean something. The next morning brought another unexpected visitor. A woman on foot, limping worse than Ilara, carrying a small child. She collapsed just within sight of the cabin. They ran to her as much as Ilara could run. The woman was Mexican, her face swollen from beatings, the child perhaps 2 years old. "Please," she gasped in Spanish. "Help!" They brought her inside, laid her on the bed. Ilara tended her wounds while Samuel heated water. The woman's back bore whip marks, her feet were bloody from walking. "What happened?" Ilara asked in Spanish. "My husband. He drinks. Beats me. I ran. But he'll follow." "What's your name?" "Maria. This is Rosa." The child clung to her mother, eyes wide with fear. "You're safe here," Ilara said. "He'll come. He always comes. Then he'll meet my husband." Maria looked at Samuel, saw the strength in him, the protective stance. "You would fight for strangers. We would fight for anyone who needs it, Samuel said, understanding enough Spanish to follow. They were making a meal for Maria when horses thundered up. A man dismounted drunk and furious, waving a pistol. Where is she? Where's my wife? Samuel stepped outside, hammer in hand. Lower the gun. She's mine, my property. She's a person, not property. Give her back, or I'll... The gun went off. Samuel moved faster than thought, the hammer leaving his hand, catching the man's wrist. The gun flew into the dirt. Before the man could react, Samuel had him on the ground, knee on his back. You're going to leave. You're not coming back. If I see you near here again, if I hear you've hurt any woman again, I'll find you. Understand? The man sputtered, cursed, but nodded. Samuel let him up, watched him ride away. Inside, Maria wept with relief. We have nowhere to go. Stay here tonight, Alara said. Tomorrow we'll figure out tomorrow. They made beds on the floor for Maria and Rosa. The child, feeling safe for the first time in memory, fell asleep in Alara's arms. Maria watched with wonder. You have no children. Can't. Alara said simply. I'm sorry. Don't be. Maybe this is why. So I could help other people's children. That night, with Maria and Rosa sleeping by the stove, Samuel and Alara held each other closer than before. We're collecting strays, he murmured. Like us. Like us. Is that bad? No. It's what Sarah would have done. She always said empty homes were wasted homes. Your Sarah was wise. My Sarah is gone. You're here. Is that enough? He kissed her forehead. It's becoming everything. Word spread about them sheltering Maria. Some saw it as more evidence of their strangeness. Others saw it as Christian charity. The Reverend predictably saw it as harboring sin. He arrived the next afternoon with a delegation. You're housing a runaway wife, he accused. We're protecting a beaten woman, Samuel countered. The Bible says wives submit to their husbands. The Bible says a lot of things you ignore when convenient, Alara said. Like loving thy neighbor, like judge not lest ye be judged. You dare lecture me on Scripture? Someone needs to. Mary Chen arrived then with Lee bringing food and supplies. Behind them came Mrs. Rodriguez Jake Morrison, and surprisingly, the banker's wife, Margaret Hutchins. Margaret, the Reverend said, shocked. My first husband beat me, she said quietly. Before Edgar, before I came west, I know what it's like. These people are doing God's work, Josiah. Real God's work, not just talking about it. The Reverend looked around, saw his support eroding. This isn't over. Yes, Samuel said firmly. It is. After they left, Margaret Hutchins stayed behind. I have a proposition, she said. Maria needs work. I need help with housework. Edgar's getting older. I could use the assistance. We have a small room she and Rosa could use. You would do this, Maria asked in broken English. Women need to help each other. It took me too long to learn that. Within a week, Maria and Rosa were settled with the Hutchins. Maria worked hard. Rosa played in their garden, and slowly the town began to see that kindness could cross all kinds of borders. The desert willows Alara planted began to sprout tiny green shoots reaching toward light. She tended them carefully, whispering to them in Apache, Spanish, and English, all her languages of hope. They're growing, Samuel said one evening, watching her water them. Against all odds. Like us. Like us. Thomas Crow Feather returned this time with a request. The army wanted to negotiate. Would Alara translate, "It's dangerous," Samuel said. Everything's dangerous. At least this might help. The meeting was tense. Captain Harrison on one side, Thomas and his peaceful faction on the other, hawks from both groups ready for violence. Alara stood between them, translating not just words, but intentions, fears, hopes. We want to live, Thomas said through her, not just survive. Live, farm, raise our children, keep some of our ways. The government wants you contained, Harrison replied. Controlled. Then we'll die fighting. Then you'll die." "Stop," Ilara said, not translating, but speaking for herself. "Both of you, you're talking past each other. Captain, they're not asking for the moon. They want dignity. Thomas, the army isn't going away. You need to be practical." "You forget your place," the captain said. "My place is preventing bloodshed. Isn't that why you asked for my help?" Hours of negotiation followed. Ilara's legs screamed from standing so long, but she didn't sit, didn't show weakness. Finally, an agreement, not perfect, but survivable. The peaceful Apache would get land near the river, not the best land, but workable. They could keep their language, some traditions. In return, no raiding, no violence. "You did it," Samuel said that night, rubbing her aching leg. "I did something. Whether it holds, it's more than anyone else managed." "I'm tired, Samuel, tired of being between worlds." "Then just be in ours. This world, the one we're making." Spring brought trouble with its wildflowers. The desert willows Ilara had planted were blooming now pale pink flowers that seemed impossible in the harsh landscape. She tended them each morning while Samuel worked the forge, their life having found a rhythm that felt almost like peace. The town had slowly, grudgingly begun to accept them. Orders came steadily. Maria visited with Rosa, who called Ilara Tia, and climbed into her lap despite the bad leg. Then the drought started. It began subtly a few weeks without rain, when rain should have come. Then the creek that ran a mile from their cabin slowed to a trickle. The well water dropped lower each day. By the third month without rain, the situation was desperate. Samuel stood at the well pulling up a bucket barely quarter full of muddy water. "It's going," he said simply. "How long?" "Maybe 2 weeks. 3 if we're careful." Ilara looked at her desert willows, already drooping despite her careful rationing. The whole town must be suffering. The whole territory is suffering. That afternoon, riders approached not army, not Apache, but townspeople. The Reverend led them with several of his most devoted followers. Their faces were grim, desperate. "Hart," the Reverend said without preamble, "we need to talk." "So talk." "The drought, it's killing us. Crops failing, cattle, dying, wells running dry." "Same here." "Yes, but we know why." The Reverend's eyes fixed on Ilara. "It started after you came, after this unholy union." "You're blaming my wife for the weather." Samuel's voice was dangerously quiet. "She's cursed. The Apache said so themselves. Now that curse has spread to all of us." "That's insane. Is it no rain since you married her? The creek drying up, even the desert springs the Apache knew about gone." The Reverend stepped closer. "Send her away, and maybe God will forgive us." "Get off my land." "This affects all of us, Hart. The town is dying. The town is facing a drought. It happens. It's not about curses or God's judgment. It's about weather." One of the men with the Reverend Carl Dobbs, who ran the feed store, spoke up. "My youngest is sick, Sam. No water to cool her fever. If sending away one Apache woman might bring rain." "Then what?" Ilara interrupted, stepping out from the cabin. "You'll blame the next drought on the Chinese, the Mexicans, anyone different. Where does it end?" "With you," the Reverend said coldly. "It ends with you leaving." "She's not going anywhere," Samuel said. "Then you've doomed us all." After they left, Ilara sat heavily in her chair, the weight of their hatred pressing down on her. "Maybe I should go," she said quietly. "Don't. If something happened to you because of me, nothing's happening because of you. This is nature, not divine punishment." They believe it. They believe what's easier than facing the truth, that sometimes bad things just happen. That night, the wind rose hot and dry, carrying dust that seeped through every crack. They lay in bed, listening to it howl, holding each other against more than just the storm. "Tell me about rain," Ilara whispered. Sarah used to love thunderstorms. She'd stand on the porch, arms spread wide, letting it soak her. Said it was like heaven washing the world clean. My mother, my real mother, she had a rain song. I barely remember it. Sing what you remember. She sang softly in Spanish words, half-forgotten melody, uncertain. But in the darkness, with dust rattling the windows, it sounded like hope. The next morning brought Thomas Crow Feather and 6 Apache warriors. Their horses were thin, their faces gaunt. The reservation wells are failing, Thomas said without greeting. The army promises water that doesn't come. My people are dying. Everyone's dying, Samuel replied. But my people are dying first. Always first. Thomas looked at Alara. Some blame you. For bringing the curse to the whites. They say your bad medicine spreads. So everyone hates me now. Apache and white alike. Not everyone, but enough. Thomas paused. There might be a way. What way? Old grandmother remembers when this happened before. 50 summers ago. There's a place sacred to our people. Hidden springs that run deep, fed by the mountains. But it's forbidden to outsiders. Then why tell us? Because you're not outsiders. Not anymore. Alara is Apache by blood. You're her husband. And we need allies if any of us are going to survive this. Where? Samuel asked. 2 days' ride into the mountains. Dangerous country. And if the whites knew about it, they'd take it, Alara finished. Yes? So why trust us? Because you stood for her when no one else would. Because she stands between worlds and tries to build bridges. Because, Thomas paused. Because old grandmother dreamed of desert willows blooming in drought. When I heard about Alara's flowers, I knew. They spent the day preparing. Samuel filled what containers they had with their remaining water. Alara packed food, medical supplies, anything they might need. Neither spoke about the possibility they might not return. Just before dawn, they set out. Samuel on his steady mare, Alara on a gentle mule that accommodated her bad leg. The town was still sleeping, but curtains twitched as they passed. Everyone watching, everyone judging. The first day's ride was brutal. The heat pressed down like a physical weight. Dust devils danced across the barren land. Their water ran low despite careful rationing. Alara's leg screamed with each jolt, but she said nothing endured as she always had. They camped that night in a narrow canyon, sharing their last full water skin. If we don't find the springs, Samuel started. We will. How do you know? Because the alternative is everyone dying, and I'm tired of death winning. The second day brought them into the mountains proper. The trail, narrowed wound between massive rocks, disappeared entirely in places. Alara navigated by instinct and half-remembered stories following marks on stones that meant nothing to Samuel, but spoke to her of ancient passages. Then the horses refused to go further. They stood at the edge of a crevasse, barely visible in the cliff face. The animals stamped nervously, eyes rolling. We walk from here, Alara said. Your leg will manage. They picked their way down into the crevasse. The walls pressed close, blocking out the sun. The air grew cooler, and then Samuel stopped. Do you smell that water? Faint, but unmistakable. They pushed forward the passage, widening suddenly into a hidden canyon. And there, impossible but real, was green. Trees, grass, and at the center, a pool of clear water fed by springs seeping from the rock. My God, Samuel breathed. Alara was crying. She didn't know when she'd started. They stumbled forward, fell to their knees at the pool's edge, drank deeply. The water was cold, sweet, perfect. We have to be careful, Alara said when they'd drunk their fill. This is sacred. We can't destroy it. We won't, but we need to bring water back. Prove it exists. They filled their containers carefully, reverently. As they worked, Alara noticed something paintings on the canyon walls. Ancient figures, dancing hands raised to the sky. Rain dancers, she whispered. This is where they came to pray for rain. Did it work? Sometimes. When the dancers were pure of heart, the stories say. Are we pure enough? She looked at him, this man who'd lost everything and still chose kindness, who'd paid gold for her freedom and never asked for payment. You are, she said. We are, he corrected. They stayed the night in the canyon, sleeping under stars visible through the narrow opening above. In the morning, they gathered more water and began the journey back. But they weren't alone. 5 men waited at the crevasse entrance, the Reverend's followers, armed and desperate. Figured you'd run, Carl Dobbs said. Figured you'd save yourselves and leave us to die. We didn't run, Samuel said carefully. We found water. Where? Hidden. Sacred to the Apache. Show us. No, Elara said firmly. It's not ours to share. Not like this. You'd let us die. We brought water back. We'll share that. But the location that has to be negotiated. Protected, or men like you will drain it dry in a week. Carl raised his rifle. Show us or we take it anyway. That's when the Apache appeared, Thomas and his warriors rising from concealment among the rocks. Lower your weapons, Thomas said in clear English. Indians, one of the men shouted, panic in his voice. Friends, Elara said quickly, stepping between the groups. They're friends. Everyone lower your guns. For a moment, violence balanced on a knife's edge. Then Samuel spoke. Carl, you have a choice. Fight and maybe die. Certainly lose any chance at water. Or listen and maybe save your family. Carl's rifle wavered. My little girl. We'll get water, I promise. But not through violence. Not through theft. Slowly, Carl lowered his weapon. The others followed. Thomas spoke. The springs are sacred, but sacred doesn't mean forbidden. It means respected, shared carefully. We propose a treaty. Apache and white together, managing the water until the rains return. The town won't agree to that, the Reverend's man spat. Then the town dies, Thomas said simply. They rode back together, an unlikely procession, Apache warriors, desperate townsmen, and in the center, Samuel and Elara, with their precious cargo of water. The town square erupted when they arrived. Shouts, accusations, fear, and desperate hope all mingled. The Reverend stood on the church steps, red-faced and furious. You bring savages into our town. We bring neighbors, Samuel said loudly. And water. That stopped the shouting. Margaret Hutchins pushed forward, her husband Edgar beside her. Water, really? Elara lifted a full water skin. Hidden springs. Enough for everyone if we're careful. If we share. Share with Indians, someone shouted. Share or die, Thomas said. Your choice. Judge Carter, practical as always, stepped forward. What are you proposing? A water treaty, Samuel said. Apache and townspeople together, equal shares, equal responsibility. The springs stay protected, everyone survives. That's insane, the Reverend declared. That's survival, Edgar Hutchins said unexpectedly. I'm a banker. I understand resources. This makes sense. You'd side with them. I'd side with my wife, living through this drought. Arguments raged for hours, but as the day grew hotter and the dust thicker, practicality won. A vote was called. By a narrow margin, the treaty passed. The Reverend stood defeated, but unbowed. This is heresy. You've damned us all. No, Elara said, stepping forward. We've saved you. Despite everything you've done, every name you've called me, every curse you've wished on us, we still brought you water. That's not damnation. That's grace. You dare speak of grace. I dare live it. Something you might try, Reverend. Over the following weeks, a careful system emerged. Groups from the town and the reservation traveled together to the springs, filled containers under watchful eyes from both communities, ensuring no one took more than their share. It wasn't easy. Generations of mistrust didn't disappear overnight. But thirst was a powerful motivator. Samuel built a better pulley system for the sacred springs. Apache youth helped him haul materials. Town children, curious and less poisoned by prejudice, began learning Apache words. Small connections formed. Ilara translated, mediated, stood for hours, despite her aching leg, making sure everyone understood the rules, the reasons, the necessity of cooperation. "You're going to collapse," Samuel told her one evening as she nearly fell getting into bed. "Worth it if it works. And if it doesn't, then at least we tried something different than hate." One morning, clouds appeared on the horizon, real clouds heavy with promise. The town gathered in the square, Apache and white alike, watching the sky with desperate hope. The first drops fell at noon, scattered, uncertain, then more. Then the sky opened and rain poured down in sheets. People danced, cried, raised their faces to heaven. Apache and townsfolk alike stood in the square, soaked and laughing. Children splashed in rapidly forming puddles. Even the Reverend's followers couldn't help but smile. In the midst of it all, Samuel found Ilara. She stood with her walking stick face turned up to the rain tears mixing with rainwater. He pulled her close, kissed her deeply, not caring who saw. "We did it," she said against his lips. "You did it. We. Always we." Thomas Crow Feather approached, rain streaming down his face. "Old grandmother wants to meet you. Both of you. She says the desert willows were a sign, but there's more. More. A ceremony, a blessing, a formal adoption into the tribe if you want it. Both of you." Ilara's eye widened. "But I was cast out by a dead chief whose pride killed more than drought ever could. The new tribal council voted. You've earned your place back if you want it, and your husband has earned a place beside you." Samuel looked at Ilara. "Your choice." "Our choice," she corrected. "What do you think?" "I think family is family, however it comes." The ceremony was held 3 days later at the sacred springs. Old grandmother, ancient beyond counting, spoke words in Apache that Thomas translated, about bridges between worlds, about strength found in difference, about desert willows that bloom in drought, and love that grows in unlikely soil. Samuel and Ilara drank from the sacred pool, accepted marks of ash and ochre on their foreheads, received new names. Samuel became Iron Heart, the one who bends but doesn't break. Ilara became Bridgewalker, the one who stands between. Not everyone in town approved. The Reverend preached about corruption and contamination, but his congregation had shrunk. People remembered who brought water when they were dying of thirst. The rains brought life back to the desert, but they also brought unexpected challenges. The sacred springs, no longer the only source of water, became a point of contention. Some townspeople wanted unrestricted access now that the crisis had passed. Some Apache wanted to close it off, completely return it to being forbidden to outsiders. Samuel and Ilara found themselves once again standing between two worlds. "We need a permanent solution," Samuel said one evening, studying the water treaty they'd hastily drafted during the drought. "Something that protects the springs but keeps the peace we've built." "A council," Ilara suggested. "Equal members from both communities. Decisions made together. The Reverend will fight it." "The Reverend's fighting days are ending. Have you seen his congregation lately? Even Mrs. Mills comes to Margaret's sewing circle now instead of his prayer meetings." It was true. The shared crisis had shifted something fundamental in Silver Creek. Boundaries still existed, prejudices still lingered, but they'd been cracked open like the earth accepting rain. The next morning brought news that would crack them further open. Captain Harrison arrived with a small detail, but his manner was different, less military precision, more weary resignation. "The War Department is changing its approach," he announced to the gathered crowd. "The President has signed new legislation. Tribes that demonstrate peaceful cooperation with local communities can petition for expanded rights, land ownership, citizenship paths, educational access." "What's the catch?" Thomas Crow Feather asked suspiciously. "Full integration, no more separate reservations, Apache children in white schools, adults paying taxes following territorial law, abandoning our ways, an elder spat, or adapting them, Ilara said, stepping forward. Not abandoning weaving together. Easy for you to say. You already live in their world. I live in both worlds. It's possible. Hard, but possible. Arguments erupted in both languages. Samuel watched Ilara translate frantically, trying to help each side understand not just words, but fears, hopes, possibilities. Stop. Margaret Hutchins's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone turned to stare at the banker's wife, who rarely raised her voice. Look at us. Really look. A year ago, we were ready to kill each other over water. Now we're arguing about how to live together better. That's progress. That's surrender. The Reverend countered, but his voice lacked its old fire. No, said a new voice. Judge Carter pushed through the crowd, carrying a thick folder. That's law. I've been corresponding with the territorial government. They're willing to recognize Silver Creek as an experimental, integrated community. Shared governance, shared resources, shared future. You did this without consulting us, the Reverend demanded. I did this because someone had to think beyond tomorrow. Hart and his wife proved it could work during the drought. Now we make it permanent, or we go back to the old ways, the killing, the raiding, the fear. I won't live alongside savages. Then leave, Edgar Hutchins said flatly, because the bank is backing this proposal. Any business that wants loans going forward will participate in the integrated community. It was economic pragmatism, not idealism, but it worked. The Reverend's support crumbled as even his most devoted followers chose financial survival over ideological purity. The transition wasn't smooth. There were fights when Apache children entered the schoolhouse for the first time. Tensions when young Apache men applied for work at white-owned businesses. Confusion when white families were invited to Apache ceremonies. But there were also unexpected connections. Jake Morrison fell in love with an Apache girl named Morning Dove. Mrs. Rodriguez discovered her grandmother had been Pueblo, began learning traditional weaving from Apache women. Children has always adapted fastest, playing together, learning each other's languages, seeing difference as interesting rather than threatening. Samuel and Ilara's cabin became neutral ground, a place where both communities could meet safely. They mediated disputes, translated documents, hosted meals where Apache fry bread sat beside German sausage and Mexican beans. We're building something new, Ilara said one night, exhausted from a day of managing conflicts, something that's never existed before. Is it working? Ask me in 10 years. But they wouldn't have to wait that long for validation. 6 months after integration began, a delegation arrived from Washington. Government officials, newspaper reporters, even a photographer with his elaborate equipment. We've heard remarkable things about Silver Creek, the lead official, Mr. Davidson, said. A town where Apache and whites live as equals. We've come to see if it's true. The Reverend saw his chance. He cornered the delegation, poured out stories of corruption, miscegenation, the abandonment of Christian values. This woman, he said, pointing at Ilara, has bewitched them all. She's not truly married what God would bless such a union. She's a spy, a curse, The reason this town survived the drought, Margaret Hutchins interrupted. The reason Apache and white children learn together now. The reason we have peace instead of bloodshed. The photographer was more interested in images than arguments. He set up his camera, taking pictures of the integrated schoolhouse, the mixed market where Apache crafts sold alongside American goods, the Water Council meeting where Thomas Crow Feather and Edgar Hutchins debated in English and Apache with Ilara translating. But the image that would become famous, that would appear in newspapers across the country, was unplanned. Rosa Maria's daughter, now 5 years old, ran to Ilara during the photographer's visit. She'd fallen and scraped her knee. Ilara knelt awkwardly, her bad leg stretched to the side, cleaning the wound, while Rosa clung to her. Samuel stood behind them, his hand on Elara's shoulder, protective and proud. At that moment, Mourning Dove's grandmother approached with a traditional Apache blessing for the child. Mary Chen offered a Chinese remedy her mother had taught her. Mrs. Rodriguez provided clean bandages. The photographer captured it all, a moment of community care that transcended every boundary the Reverend preached about. This, Mr. Davidson said quietly, this is what America could be. The article that followed was titled "The Desert Miracle: How One Town Chose Unity Over Division." It spread across the country, bringing curious visitors, some supportive, others skeptical, all wanting to see if it was real. Not everyone celebrated the attention. The Reverend, his influence shattered, made one last desperate play. He wrote to church authorities claiming Samuel and Elara's marriage was invalid, that she was still legally Apache property, that the whole town was living in sin. The response came not from church authorities, but from an unexpected source, Sister Catherine the missionary who had taught Elara to read. She arrived on a dusty Tuesday, older but still formidable, her nun's habit impeccable despite the desert heat. "Elara," she called out, and Elara froze, then limped forward slowly. "Sister, let me look at you." The nun studied her former student. "Married, I hear, to a good man, the best man, and happy. Yes? Then God's work is done." She turned to the Reverend. "I've come with documents, baptismal records, educational certificates, legal attestations. Elara was a registered member of our mission. Her marriage is as valid as any I've witnessed." "But she's Apache. She's a child of God, as are we all. Or did you skip that part of seminary?" The Reverend left Silver Creek the next week, followed by his few remaining supporters. The church stood empty for a month before the community voted to make it interfaith, a place where Christian services, Apache ceremonies, and Chinese celebrations could all find home. As the second anniversary of their marriage approached, Samuel surprised Elara with a gift. He'd been working secretly in the forge, crafting something special. "Close your eyes," he said, leading her outside. When she opened them, she saw a new walking stick, not rough-hewn like her old one, but beautifully crafted from iron and wood, decorated with Apache symbols and Spanish words strong enough to support her, but elegant enough for any occasion. "Samuel," she breathed. "Look closer." Engraved along the shaft were words in English: "Elara Hart, Bridgewalker, beloved wife." She was crying. She didn't care. "It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm broken. You're you. That's all I've ever wanted." That night, as they lay together, she said, "I want to try." "Try what, the doctor in Tucson, the one Mary told us about. He thinks he might be able to help with my leg. Not fix it, but improve it." "That's dangerous surgery. Everything we've done has been dangerous." "Why now?" "Because I want to dance at the harvest celebration. Really dance, not just sway. I want to run with Rosa when she plays. I want—" She paused. "I want to stand straight beside you, not because I have to prove something, but because I can. You don't need to change for me. I know. That's why I can choose to try." The surgery was scheduled for spring. The whole town contributed to the cost, even some who'd opposed them initially. The Water Council managed Samuel's forge while he traveled with Elara to Tucson. The operation was partial success. She'd never walk without a limp, but the pain decreased significantly. The new walking stick became more aid than crutch, and at the harvest celebration she did dance carefully, supported by Samuel's strong arms, but dancing nonetheless. "You're beautiful," he whispered as they swayed to a mixture of Apache drums and Mexican guitars. "You're biased." "Completely. Doesn't make it less true." Thomas Crow Feather approached as the music ended. "The council has decided. We want to name the sacred springs. Name them Heart Springs for both of you. The place where two peoples came together and chose survival over pride." "That's too much honor," Elara protested. "That's not enough honor, but it's what we can give." As the evening continued, Samuel watched Elara move through the crowd. She translated jokes between Apache elders and town merchants. She taught Chinese children Apache words. She mediated a dispute between two farmers over water rights with patience and wisdom. "She's remarkable," Sister Catherine said, appearing beside him. "She saved us all." "No, you saved each other. That's what love does. It makes us brave enough to bridge impossible distances." "Sister, do you think Sarah would approve my first wife?" The nun considered. "I think Sarah would be grateful her husband found someone worthy of his heart. I think she'd see that you didn't replace her. You grew room for more love. That's not betrayal. That's grace." As the celebration continued around them, a young Apache woman approached Ilara. She was pregnant, married to a white settler, facing the same prejudices Ilara had faced. "How do you do it?" the young woman asked. "How do you stand being between worlds?" "You don't stand between them," Ilara said gently. "You weave them together. Every meal you cook that combines traditions. Every word you translate. Every child you raise who sees both sides as family. You're not between. You're the thread that connects. Is it worth it? The pain." Ilara looked at Samuel, who was teaching Apache boys to shape horseshoes while their fathers watched with interest instead of suspicion. She looked at Rosa, playing with both Apache and white children, no awareness of the boundaries that once would have separated them. She looked at the desert willows she'd transplanted near the springs, blooming impossibly in the harsh landscape. "Yes," she said simply, "it's worth everything." 5 years had passed since that desperate day at the trading post. 5 years since Samuel Hart had thrown down $20 for a woman everyone called cursed. Now Silver Creek had become something neither of them could have imagined, a living testament to what was possible when people chose hope over fear. The morning of their 5th anniversary dawned clear and bright. Ilara woke first, as had become her habit, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and pink. Her leg ached less these days, the surgery and time having worked their slow healing. She could walk the full length of their property, now tend her expanded garden, where desert willows grew alongside Mexican marigolds and Apache tea. Samuel stirred beside her, his arm tightening around her waist. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Hart." "Happy anniversary, Mr. Hart." 5 years. Did you think we'd make it this far?" "I didn't think we'd make it 5 days," she admitted. "But here we are. Here we are." They rose together, moving through their morning routine with the ease of long practice. But today was different. Today, the entire town, both communities now truly one, would gather for a celebration that had become annual tradition. The anniversary of unity, they called it, marking not just Samuel and Ilara's marriage, but the beginning of Silver Creek's transformation. As Ilara prepared breakfast, Rosa burst through the door without knocking, as was her right as unofficial adopted daughter. "Tia Ilara Tio Samuel Mama says to come early. She's making your favorite bread." Maria followed her daughter smiling. She'd remarried last year to Jake Morrison, of all people, and the 4 of them had formed an extended family that defied all conventional boundaries. "Let the woman have her breakfast first, Mija." Maria laughed. "But there's so much to do. The Apache dancers are coming, and Mrs. Chen is making those dumplings, and Judge Carter is bringing his new wife from back east to meet everyone, and it will all happen whether we rush or not," Samuel said, ruffling Rosa's hair. The child had grown strong and confident, switching between English, Spanish, and Apache as easily as breathing. She represented everything Silver Creek had become, a mixture that was somehow more than its parts. As they walked to town later, Ilara using her beautiful walking stick, more for style than necessity, now they passed the new schoolhouse. Larger than the old one built by Apache, and white hands working together. Through the windows, they could see Mrs. Patterson teaching a mixed class, children of all backgrounds, learning each other's histories alongside arithmetic and reading. "Remember when the Reverend said education would be our downfall?" Samuel mused. He was right in a way. It was the downfall of ignorance. The Reverend had written once 6 months after leaving, a short note admitting he'd found a new congregation in California. That distance had given him perspective that perhaps he'd been wrong. He'd even sent a small donation for the Interfaith Church. Ilara had wept at that letter, not from sadness, but from the proof that even the hardest hearts could change. The town square was already bustling when they arrived. Booths sold Apache jewelry alongside Pennsylvania Dutch quilts. The smell of Chinese noodles mixed with Mexican pozole and Apache fry bread. Children ran between the stalls, their laughter a symphony of accents and languages. Thomas Crow Feather approached his own children in tow. He'd married Margaret Hutchins's niece, a scandal that had become a celebrated love story. Brother, he said to Samuel in Apache, a language Samuel had slowly learned. Sister to Ilara. The council has something for you. The Water Council, now the governing body of Silver Creek, had prepared a ceremony. Elder Watchman, the oldest surviving Apache, stood with Judge Carter, the two men who'd once been enemies now serving as co-leaders. 5 years ago, Judge Carter began, this town was dying, not just from drought, but from hate, from fear, from the poison of believing different meant dangerous. Elder Watchman continued in Apache Ilara, translating, two people showed us another way, not perfect people, not chosen ones, just two broken souls who chose to build rather than tear down. They presented a plaque to be mounted at Heart Springs. Here love conquered fear. Here unity conquered division. Here the impossible became possible. Speech. Someone called out, and others took up the cry. Samuel looked at Ilara. She nodded, and they stood together. We're not heroes, Samuel said simply. We're just people who got tired of being alone, who learned that different doesn't mean wrong, who discovered that broken things, when fitted together right, can become stronger than they were whole. Ilara added, every person here made a choice, to see neighbors instead of enemies, to teach instead of fear, to build instead of burn. We didn't save this town. This town saved itself. We just went first. The celebration continued all day. Apache drums and Baptist hymns, Catholic prayers and Buddhist meditation for even a small group of Chinese Buddhist railroad workers had settled here, drawn by stories of acceptance. Children performed plays about the drought and reconciliation. Adults shared food stories, laughter. As the sun began to set, Ilara found herself standing at the edge of the gathering with Sister Catherine, who'd moved to Silver Creek permanently to help run the school. You did God's work here, the nun said. I did human work. Maybe that's the same thing. Maybe it is. Samuel appeared with news. There's a delegation coming from Phoenix next month. They want to study what we've done, make it a model for other towns. Lord help us. Ilara laughed. We barely know what we're doing ourselves, but we're doing it. That's what matters. As full dark fell lanterns were lit throughout the square, the photographer from the territorial newspaper was back capturing images of Apache and white Mexican and Chinese all celebrating together. One photo would become iconic. The entire town gathered around Heart Springs, faces lit by lanterns. Hands joined in a human chain that stretched from the water to the desert, every color and creed linked together. Thomas stood to make an announcement. The tribal council and the town council have voted. We want to propose something to the territorial government. Full integration, not Apache land and white land, but one township. Equal representation, equal rights, equal responsibilities. True unity. The crowd erupted in discussion, excited, nervous, hopeful. It won't be easy, Judge Carter admitted. There will be opposition from both sides. People who profit from division won't surrender easily. But we've proven it works, Margaret Hutchins said. Our children grow up seeing each other as family. Our businesses thrive on diverse trade. Our community is stronger for its differences. "Then we try," Samuel said. "We've come this far by choosing the harder path. Why stop now?" As the evening wound down, couples danced to a mixture of music waltz and traditional Apache Mexican folk and Chinese melodies. Samuel and Alara swayed together, her head on his shoulder, his arms steady around her. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The simple life you had before." "That wasn't life. That was just existence. This complicated, difficult, beautiful, this is life. Sarah would be proud of you. She would be proud of us. Of all of this." Young Rosa ran up, tugging at Ilara's dress. "Tia, will you tell the story about the $20? It had become legend that moment at the trading post. Children requested it like a fairy tale, though it was entirely true. Ilara sat Rosa on her lap, other children gathering around. Adults paused to listen too, even those who'd been there. Once upon a time, she began. There was a man who'd forgotten how to hope, and a woman who'd forgotten she was worth hoping for. The world told them they were too different, too broken, too wrong for each other. But sometimes what the world calls wrong is actually the first step toward making things right. She told the story simply honestly, the cruelty and the kindness, the fear and the courage. The way two people choosing each other had somehow led to an entire town choosing unity. "And they lived happily ever after?" Rosa asked, though she knew the answer. "They lived," Ilara said, "with happiness and sorrow, struggle and joy, failure and success. But they lived together, and that made all the difference." As the celebration ended and families made their way home, Samuel and Ilara walked slowly back to their cabin. The desert willows were blooming, their sweet scent carried on the night wind. The springs bubbled peacefully, shared and protected. The town slept peaceful, unified. "What would you change?" Samuel asked. "If you could go back?" "Nothing," Ilara said without hesitation. Every cruel word, every painful step, every moment of doubt, they all led here, to this, to us. They stood together, looking out over the land they'd helped transform. Not perfect perfection wasn't possible, but real and growing and good. "You know what I think," Samuel said. "What?" "I think those $20 were the best investment I ever made." She laughed, the sound carrying across the desert like hope itself. "You bought my freedom." "No," he corrected, pulling her close. "You freed us all. You showed us bridges could be built, even where canyons seemed impossible to cross. That's worth more than gold." "Then what's it worth?" "Everything. It's worth everything." The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had watched their desperate beginning, that now witnessed their triumphant continuation. In Silver Creek, Apache and white Mexican and Chinese, broken and whole, all slept under the same sky, citizens of something new, something unprecedented, something that had begun with a mocking chief, a $20 gold piece, and two people brave enough to see possibility where others saw only endings. The message was simple, carved now in wood and stone, and living hearts. Love is stronger than fear. Unity is stronger than division. And sometimes the most broken things, when joined together with courage and compassion, create something unbreakably beautiful. The desert bloomed around them, impossible but true, just like their love, just like their town, just like the future they were building, one choice at a time.